Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and I am so excited to welcome you today to the Breaking Free Show. I hope you're all doing really well. Hope you've all had a wonderful week, and we have a wonderfully fun show in store. So here we go. Remember, you are all welcome to call in anytime you want. You can take part in the show. Just like go under the video, and to the right of the video, you see a line, nickname, put your name there and take part in the chat. You can ask questions, you can comment, you can talk to all the other people in there. And during the show, you can call in to 919-518-9773 if you've got a phone, or you can come in on Skype, and that's computers two, that's the number two, K voice, anytime you want, because this show is for you. And before we get on with our show, and I introduce my guest to you today, I'm going to say hi to Amnon. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. And you?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
You look fine too.
I am fine.
And
fine,
I love that
fine,
new
fine.
picture, but
Thank
everybody's
you.
going to have to wait
They're
till
gonna
the
have
end.
to wait till the end.
Yeah.
I had to succumb to getting a new picture because I grew my hair longer, and my picture was short hair, and you couldn't do that anymore. So
Yeah.
I'd go places and people didn't know who if I was me or somebody else. So I went ahead and got a new headshot, and I didn't want to do it, but I did it. So I'm unveiling it later. You'll see. So with that, let's get on with our show. So I want to introduce my friend today, Greg Whitt.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, huh?
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun show. So today, Greg is our drummer boy, and he is doing things to really help through drumming to really support connection between people. And he's going to get into all of that and some of his story and where he comes from and how he got started and good story. And I want to say, I do a lot of stories, techniques, strategies, philosophies, all about breaking free. And I'm very devoted to sharing men. I know that, I share men and women all the time, but I really want to get into a lot of men and the stories that motivate them, that drive them, and to share their journey as well. So feel free if you are a man or you know a man and you'd like to share your story, let me know, okay? Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com. So, who's Greg?
Wow. So I'm Greg Whitt, and I'm a facilitator and educator. And I work with people who are trying to reconnect with one another and with the planet around them.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that is an
Lofty
elevator
goals,
speech.
right?
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's an elevator speech like I never had. So how do you do it?
So I use drums and percussion as a modality for uh, using improvisational music making to break down the barriers that language often causes. So we're working on embodying rather than understanding some of these ways that help people play nicely together.
So what got you motivated to do this?
It was a total accident. So my background was military and higher education. And when I left those fields and started looking for something else to do, I stumbled upon an occasion to witness a drummer playing an African drum called a djembe drum lead a parade of 300 children through the campus at North Carolina State University. And I was mesmerized. So I jumped in the parade and followed them along and cornered the guy at the end and said, "What is that? How did you learn it? And where do I get one? I need to do this thing." And so that became a hobby, that became a passion, that ultimately became a livelihood.
So when you say mesmerized you, what do you mean?
Well, there's something about rhythm that connects with people on a heart level. We start in the womb by feeling and hearing our mother's heartbeat. So people are naturally attuned to rhythms. And I think as we progress through life, we start to ignore those kinds of things. When you're a kid, you play outside, you're connected to nature. When you are a grown up, you work inside because you've got to earn a living. So as we maneuver through our lives, we kind of lose touch with some of those natural rhythm models that help us, I guess, help us reconnect with the old ways of being.
It's so interesting because certainly music, we connect through music,
Sure.
we connect through a lot of things, but there is something that I can see, and I don't know about it, but I can feel it, that with a rhythm we join in, or we join the rhythm. We
Yeah.
connect with each other and we join in at if the beat is, if it's, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
We can join each other at the same place. Is that it's like a string or a tie that brings us together.
Well, there's that theory of entrainment, and people have a tendency to want to do that.
Explain entrainment.
So entrainment, most people will understand when they see these videos of a bunch of metronomes sitting on the table, and as they swing, they start to synchronize. And the science behind that is that the vibrations start to align, and that's true of metronomes sitting on a table, and that's true of people sitting in a room. And so when you hear about these old wives' tales of women who live together who have their biological cycles start to
That's
synchronize.
exactly right.
Yeah, it's just our nature to want to harmonize in rhythm with other people.
Mm. And so, what were you like growing up?
What
If
was
this
I?
got you at this point, and you were
Yeah.
in the middle, so it's like you had a childhood, a younghood, and then you get into the military, which
Hmm.
had to be, well, you explain it, and then now drumming
Yeah.
and being connected to this idea of connection. So,
Right.
what were you like growing up?
Well, I grew up in rural North Carolina, so I spent a lot of time on my own outdoors because I didn't have a whole lot of neighbors around. So I hung out in the woods, and the activities that captured my attention then were things like scouting, where I could do hiking and camping and boating and these other things that kept me connected to the natural world. And scouting has this big um, uh, tenet for service to others. And so that became a foundation for the rest of the way that I would live my life. So when I entered college, I started doing things to be of service to the community around me. I became a resident advisor in the dorms, president of different organizations. I joined a service fraternity. So everything that I was doing to grow into adulthood was all built around being of service to other people.
And connecting,
Yeah,
being a connector,
yeah,
and helping people connect.
right.
So when you were so who did you connect with growing up?
Who did I
'Cause, I mean,
connect
you
with?
connected in nature. Did you connect with people?
Some. I mean, I had some great role models and mentors as teachers and scoutmasters and those kinds of things growing up. But most I spent a lot of time on my own as a kid. I had a stay-at-home mom until I was about the age of 6, and then my brother was born, and we went off to daycare and after-school things and that kind of stuff. And mom went back to work, and my dad worked third shift, so he was there but not there a lot of the time. So I had a lot of time to do a lot of self-reflective kinds of things as a young person.
Which is interesting because I find that to be interesting in today's world in talking to a lot of men. Because those of you that might know, I'm writing a book about men, and I'm fascinated by the notion of the awakening. You know, women
Mm,
awakening, men awakening, and I'm finding that a lot of men are coming into a place of wanting to connect, of wanting to share emotionally and create creatively and all of those things. So it's interesting to see where or how it got started or how, what was what fueled a man from day one because a lot of women were given the permission,
hmm.
given dolls and stuff like that to nurture
Well, I
and
had my
connect.
GI Joe dolls, but that's not the same.
Why wasn't that the
Because then
same?
you're driving jeeps and blowing up towers and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
zip lining through the jungle
yeah.
and those kinds of things. So it's a much different kind of
Right,
play
right, right,
than I think young
right.
girls had.
Yeah, because we were given dolls to diaper and nurture
Uh,
and all of those things.
this was not that.
This was not that. But you have a certain propensity for being a certain way. Did you recognize that early on that you liked to bring people together and it mattered?
No, because as a young person spending so much time alone, I read a lot, and so I thought a lot, and that wasn't always a lot of fun. The kids that I grew up around in rural North Carolina, I didn't always like and didn't align with. I wasn't interested in little league or those kinds of things. I wasn't a sports fan, and still am not. Um, so my interests were really different, and I
Mm.
found more purposeful living through some of these organizations that were about caring for others.
It's so fascinating to me because I think, you know, we are, in some regard, we are who we are.
Mhm.
And then we have opportunities to either be different than we truly are or really to find ourselves or to just like you just started out like honoring you honored yourself is what I can see. I mean, you didn't force yourself to being friends with or doing things that you didn't like.
Right.
You didn't, did you?
No. And I
How
had
did you
a,
know that?
how did I know
Yeah,
that?
how did you know? How did you give yourself permission or know that you, at an early age, did not have to play football or did not have to do those things and you could,
Well, I didn't. There were some really disastrous experiments in there along the way, you know.
like what?
So,
Could you share?
that first summer in Little League was a big eye opener that this is not my thing, and that there are other things that capture my interest and inspire me and generate that awe and wonder that we were talking about earlier today. That
Were you bullied?
was I bullied?
Were you bullied
I think all
into?
kids were bullied at some point. You know, it's a big problem in our
So
society,
when
and particularly in boys
and boys that are
trying to
different.
find their leverage in the world.
You know, I wonder. I mean, I'm wondering if that's going to be something I discover that a lot of that a lot of boys that grow into their sensitivity have been bullied. Like I was talking to this really young, lovely young guy the other day who's a dancer,
Uh huh.
and he's like 20, and he's a dancer, and when he's been dancing since he was 6, and just loving like today he said people love to watch him do hip hop, but back then they weren't so thrilled with it, but he stuck to it.
Hmm.
I mean, he had to realize that this is who he was
Right.
and continued his path of dancing,
Yeah.
and so I love it.
I think that's the hard thing is in our society embracing Western values. There isn't often a lot of room or encouragement or support around doing what you love. It's all about doing what is expected.
Yeah, exactly. And you said your dad wasn't home that much, but was he home at all enough to spend time with you in the woods, or did he encourage you? Or
No, I didn't have that kind of relationship with my dad. Dad was the stoic that sat in the lazy boy and flipped channels or listened to the radio, and he only chimed in when there was something that mom wasn't able to manage on her own.
and later on in life, did it ever change?
At 18, I went to college and never went back really. So I don't think that has changed a whole lot. But my dad and I aren't that close, so I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay, well, it happens.
Dad is dad.
That is,
Yeah.
yeah, it happens. So let's talk about some drumming things.
Okay.
So tell us about. I have a question on the chat, and it says, Chris is wondering if drumming can help kids grow their emotional skills.
Absolutely. And I don't know that emotional skills is the way I would describe it.
Okay.
I would say relationship skills, certainly.
Okay.
But I'm not a therapist, and so I don't have a background or a training in those kinds of things. But drumming is really wonderful in that it breaks down the barriers and it levels the playing field. Anyone can participate in that regardless of their experience level. It's not like you're having a flute circle where people need a really high level of skill and training to be able to play that instrument
Right,
well.
right.
With a couple of seconds, you're banging on a drum and making sound.
And everybody can make different sound,
Right.
and it still be connected.
Yes. So my job as a facilitator of interactive rhythm programs is helping people play in cooperation with one another. And so what that does is allow a lot of nonverbal expression. So in particular in some of the health and wellness kinds of programming, you're really asking people to express themselves through the drumming, and that often shakes things loose through, if you want to say, the power of vibration. Then it's really allowing them to loosen up, literally, some of the things that they're bottling up inside.
So what have you seen? Like when you say the power of vibration, so explain that.
Like I do lots and lots of kids programs, and so when I go into a school and I'm working with children, they are confined in a classroom all day long. And maybe they get a little recess, but that isn't always true any longer. But they have an opportunity to creatively and loudly express themselves. And it's such a joy to see children get to play in that way.
What do you see when they're done? After they've drummed, after they've banged, what do you see?
There's a sense of shared experience. My programs focus on values. So we're really hitting on some of the things that tribal cultures are calling important to being able to exist together in society. So we're affirming lots of those sentiments. And then there is a biological benefit to group drumming where you've created an occasion where people can connect. You've created an occasion where people can vent. And you've created an occasion where people are able to engage in creative self expression. So there's this artistic outlet to it as well. So the kids and adults that do this kind of activity are getting it on lots of levels in ways that they can really see this calming effect. It helps to, on a clinical level, when you do some of the protocol-driven drumming activities, you're boosting the immune system, you're reducing stress. In a workplace setting, those things have benefits that relate to cost savings through reducing burnout and helping boost retention.
So you're saying that there are industry, corporations, companies that prescribe regular drumming for their employees?
I wouldn't
How
say
does that work?
regular drumming, but certainly as an activity. It's very popular for an off-site kind of occasion, retreat work,
Like a team building kind
team
of thing?
building activities. Yeah, certain corporations do this fairly often. I have one particular client that I work with at least on an annual basis. The Toyota U.S. headquarters actually has a dedicated drum room in their high rise out in California. And so there's a place where their employees can go and interact and engage on that nonverbal level to help build shared experience.
Fascinating.
It's cool.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Now you said protocol earlier about certain protocols. Like what would that be?
Yeah, so there's a couple of wellness-based drumming programs. One is called Health Rhythms, and one is called Drumbeat. Health Rhythms was developed and funded by the Remo Drum Corporation out in California, and they basically brought in a neurologist, partnered with a music therapist and social worker to do clinical research around the wellness benefits of drumming. And Drumbeat was a similar approach, using group drumming. In this case, they were in Australia, I believe, working with at-risk youth. And so they were able to get the biological feedback to determine what indigenous cultures have known for thousands and thousands of years, and that's that these shared music-making experiences are, in fact, good for you.
Wow. Phew. It really is an incredible, because it's something that you kind of know, but then to hear you speak about it takes it to a whole nother level.
Right. We know it, but we live in a world that wants to quantify it.
Right.
And so you have to have that documentation in order to market
To
this
prove it.
into some of those settings.
To prove it. So you also were talking about tribal.
Yeah.
So what talked about that? Because I know you and I have chatted about this before, and this is something that's very important to you as well, right? Different diversity and all of that.
So my graduate work was in ancient wisdom traditions and looking at the ways indigenous cultures have perpetuated for all of these thousands of years. And yet we as Westerners in our world seem to think that our way of living is better. And in fact, we have tremendous technological advances, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our quality of life is any better. So the level of relationship, I think, is really the most important thing. And that is much stronger in a close community. And generationally, we would see that, in our grandparents, how much tighter they were as a family, as a community, as a congregation, perhaps. And that has started to wane more and more as interpersonal face-to-face relationships dwindle and digital relationships flourish.
And people are moving away and doing all that stuff. So what are you looking? What is your hope? I mean, what are you motivated by?
Well, I like to create occasions to remind people of what's really important at the core of it all. We get caught up in our day to day. We're going through the routines of what we have to do, what we feel we need to do versus what we should do and what's really important,
Which is what?
which is taking care of one another.
And how do you see us doing that? How do you see us taking care of each other? I mean, so do you? Okay, you see the drumming as a way for us to come together as a begin as a kind of like a beginning for us to connect, and then once we're connected, what then?
Right. So
Okay.
really what this is an opportunity for me to introduce some big ideas around philosophy.
Oh, go for it.
And because we're doing hands-on experiential learning, we're embodying these practices rather than just trying to get them up here in our heads. So the drumming is really teaching about oneness and this whole idea that we are not separate from one another, that we are interconnected parts of a much bigger thing, and that sometimes we forget that stuff.
Mhm.
So this is a chance for me to poke you and say, hey, keep in mind that we really are all in this together, and we can't do it on our own.
So I want to again wrap myself and help my audience understand what happens when we drum together. We, if I'm just drumming
Yeah,
and there's nobody there,
right.
I can feel my heart beating to the rhythm of the drum.
Sure.
I think that happens naturally for me. If I go slow, if I go fast, me and my drum become one. And I'm
Hmm.
not drumming, but when I have drummed, that's how it felt. And I have been in a room in a as a mediator. One of the things that I've done in a big conference, peace, it was all about conflict resolution. Was
Sure.
they gave everybody drums, and we all went in, and it was a blast.
Right.
So you begin, and it was just everybody laughs at the same thing, and
Hmm.
it's just a real great opportunity. But it's that rhythm that you create that
Hmm.
people start to do they start to create a similar rhythm, or is it just really explain it again?
Well, if I break it down to the process of how I create a rhythm event,
Mhm.
I'm going to go through this continuum of control, where first I'm teaching you, and then I'm empowering you to take control on your own. And so there's this
Okay.
mythologist that I follow, a guy named Michael Meade, and he's someone that was really big in the men's movement back in the 80s, a contemporary of Joseph Campbell and Robert Bly, and really working through those ideas of empowerment through gender. And he's a drummer as well as a storyteller. And he talks about how we are able to, through this means,
Hmm.
really express the things that we don't normally get to express. And so, what's happening in a group drumming setting is that we can do it the way the indigenous cultures have done and get the benefit, but we don't have to. We can do it our own way and contemporize this kind of experience or ritual or whatever it may be so that it's more meaningful to us.
So contemporizing it means what? What would be a way of contemporizing it?
So I can go in and I can teach you a West African drumming rhythm based on a particular culture and a particular song or a particular tradition from some village and some tribe. And that's really wonderful and that's great, but that's theirs. But if we come together as a group and we create our own experience and our
Uh,
own song, and then we're engaging
uh,
in something that we're doing and
gotcha,
collaborating
gotcha.
on, it's a very different level of engagement and investment.
I see. So then we create our own music together,
Right.
and we're playing our own music together, and we
Exactly.
all have a piece of playing that music and of creating that music together.
Right. So then I'm not teaching you, I'm empowering you.
Right.
And that's a totally different approach.
Interesting. So, and you talked about the gender thing, which I find also important because I am all about the genders getting along and
Hmm.
finding their place of connection. Because I really don't believe literally that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. I just think that we're waking up and wondering where we are, but it's not because we're on different planets. It's just that we're waking up and going like, okay, now what? So, what is possible with drumming and gender connection?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm called upon to do a lot of women's work with drumming.
Okay.
Also men's work, but not as often. I think
Okay.
women are more willing to connect on that emotional and personal and vulnerable kind of experience, more so than men are. But there needs to be occasions where men and women can commune separately, and we're one of the few cultures on the planet that doesn't keep that more separate. We're all about integrating the genders, and that's not historically true in lots of other societies. We think we know better, and there are certainly benefits to that. But there's a lot of wisdom in not doing it that way
So what
too.
do you think? So what do you think?
I-
How would it be?
I think it has to be some balance of the two.
So give me an
I think there
example.
have to be occasions where men can be men and women can be women.
And what does it mean
And-
for a man to be a man and a woman to
Oh,
be?
that's a really big question.
Oh, come on, give me an answer.
Yeah. Wow. What does it mean to be a
And,
man?
and hold on.
Huh.
And if anybody wants to join this conversation, please feel free. So
Right.
call us. If you have a phone, you can call us at 919-518-9773. If you have access to Skype, come in at computers. That's plural, the number 2K voice. We'd love to have you there. You can chat with us on the chat. If you're listening to us on Blab or anywhere else, you're more than welcome to join in. We'd love to have you and, communicate your feelings about what we're talking about. So go ahead.
So what does it mean to be a man? I don't know. I'm not an expert on being a man. I'm only an expert on being me.
And well, okay. So you said it's good for men to be men, women to be women, and so what does that mean? To accept ourselves as however we are.
Exactly.
And do you feel that drumming is the key to help unlocking that?
I think drumming is a tool to help unlock that. Is
Okay.
it the key? No.
A
Is it
key.
useful?
Yeah.
Certainly.
Okay, so how? Tell me.
How? Because the drumming experience levels the playing field. Everyone is starting at the same place, right? In general, a community drum circle is an entry-level experience. No one's any better at it than anyone else. So when you go down to the park and you see all the drummers rocking out there, maybe some of them have had some training, but most of them are just self-taught. And really they're giving themselves permission to play. And that's what happens in gender-specific groups as well. I think women's groups or men's groups are just more willing to express themselves among themselves.
What do women's groups do with the drum? How do they express it differently than men or men differently than women?
I think it's less competitive with women's groups. It's more nurturing, more supportive. I think men's groups are really wailing away and getting out their pent-up frustrations because as a society, we've taught men to hold closely to their emotions and their angers, and those kinds of things get pent up. We don't have a lot of occasion to vent that male energy. Women, on the other hand, are encouraged to be loving and supportive and expressive, and so those things tend to show up when those groups segregate and engage in drumming as well.
And what happens when they come together?
It takes a little practice of getting to know you, and it takes some good.
And that's like it's like
Yeah.
all the time, right?
Right.
So go ahead.
So there's this drummer out on the West Coast that wrote a couple of books. His name's Russell Buddy Helm,
Okay.
and one of his books is called "Let the Goddess Dance" or something like that.
That sounds gorgeous.
And so he tasks men to support women in their drumming, to create safe space for that to happen. And so I think that's what we as groups need to do in general, is create those occasions where people can be themselves without judgment, without commentary. And I think drumming is a good opportunity to do that.
Why?
Why? Because it's nonverbal.
And there are other things that are nonverbal.
Yeah, I mean,
Why
we're
that?
blessed as the only creatures on the planet. The furries can't do it, the fins can't do it, the feathers can't do it. We're the only people that have the gift of language that can articulate words in the world,
Right.
right? And so we get caught up in that. We get stuck in that language, and in some regards, I think it disempowers us.
Mhm.
So we talk about things. I mean, look at the industry around mental health and talk therapy, right? Yeah, here we are talking now, but we could be drumming.
Yeah.
That's a whole different experience.
It would be a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And so I'm really digging because it's so profound what Greg is talking about that I really want to bring up the stuff we don't think about.
Yeah.
And somebody's asking if you brought drums. Well, you didn't. Too bad we didn't tell him to, right?
Right.
Did you think about bringing it?
I do, and yet it's a challenge in a studio setting.
Yes.
If you aren't set up to mic those kinds of things.
Right. Right.
And it's not as much fun on your own. I mean, one-on-one, it's certainly entertaining, but to sit and listen to drumming isn't a whole lot of fun. I don't do that. I don't sit and listen to a gaggle of drummers. I don't walk up to a drum circle in a park and just sit and listen.
Why?
I mean,
What do
that's
you do?
noise.
Oh, so
And
it's
until you actually get in it and you're a part of
oh,
it.
see, that's okay.
Yeah.
Here we're getting there. Okay, we're getting there. That's the point right there. That's a picture. So that's it,
Yeah.
right?
Now you're going to get a benefit of being near it. You're going to get that sonic massage either way. That
And
low
right,
frequency
right,
vibration
right,
is going to affect you if you're anywhere
right.
close to it. But it's not the same if you're helping create it. You know, I see it with little kids that'll go to a drumming event and they're holding their ears and saying too loud, too loud, too loud until they get their hands on a drum. And then they're part of that creation. And then the too loud doesn't happen anymore.
So you don't have to say hello. You don't have to tell who you are. You don't have to tell anybody like Greg did about his childhood. You don't have to say anything. You just pick up a stick or take your hands.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need anything in particular.
Right.
And you can join in and connect in a moment with people you don't know.
Right. But there are lots of different kinds of drum circles.
Okay.
And what you've just described would be appropriate in some of those settings.
Okay.
Right? A community drum circle where everyone is welcome. Certainly you can walk in, grab a piece of gear that's left out for sharing, and jump right in. But if you walk into an African drumming circle where they're playing specific rhythms and traditions from a culture that they're trying to honor, you can't just grab something and start banging on things and making noise. If you walk into a ceremonial drumming setting where they're embracing a particular tradition or sentiment or doing energetic or spiritual work, it's not appropriate to walk in and just
So
jump
what's
right
the
in.
advantage? And is it just what you're hearing? Is it still being a part of it even though you're not playing? Is it that my rhythm of my heart is going to be felt? Is my rhythm of my heart part of the rhythm of the group even if I'm not drumming? Is there going to be an immediate connection?
Yeah, but it's like going to the symphony. You know, you can enjoy sitting and listening
With everybody else.
with everybody else, but it's totally different when you're a player, right? Then you're contributing and not just absorbing.
Gotcha. Interesting. So our show is all about freedom, right?
Right.
So we love to share things that maybe we didn't think about before, maybe we thought about, but not in the same way. And so my feeling is, how have you thought about drumming before? Have you ever thought about drumming before? And have you ever, even if you never think about it and never do it, can you imagine an experience that people can have that don't know each other, that do, that can come together in a certain way with drumming and connect and build a relationship and have a heart-to-heart experience without even uttering a word? I mean,
I mean, I'm sure there's different kinds of experiences to do those kinds of things, but I don't know those. I just know that this is a consistently effective methodology for getting there.
Sounds good. So Suziani on our chat is saying that she plays the air drums very well.
Oh, wonderful.
Now, what is the air drum? In the air.
In the air.
And how do you play that well?
Wow, gosh, I don't know how you play that well.
Can't mess up.
Yeah,
Oh, you can't.
Always right on tune.
And you hear it.
right?
Can you hear it?
No. I mean, you're drumming along to
can
whatever's
make
on the
believe.
radio.
Oh,
Or
is
you're
that
a
what she
dashboard
says?
drummer, right?
Duh.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
imagining like hearing like of my own.
And yet, it's a physical expression of something inside you,
And
whether
you're
you hear it or not.
And you're connecting with the music on the radio.
Yeah.
So it's freedom.
I used to drum for yoga classes a lot.
Uh,
And one of the teachers I played for, her name was Leela Rasa Brown. And she said this thing in the very first class that I played for. And she said that your breath is your connection between your inner self and the outer world. And that air drumming is just that, right? You're bringing into the physical realm something that's inside you.
Well, Suziani is saying that she was being funny, but I think that there still is a level of to uncover in that even if she was being funny and it's just like this, there's still a level of connection there. There's
Yeah.
still a level of enjoyment. It's like dancing on your own or, doing anything like that.
Right.
It's a way of connecting. And my goodness, don't we need more ways of connecting?
We do, and just like Suziani is saying, she's getting obviously she's texting you and not me, but there's this this self-deprecating kind of thing when it comes to these sorts of self-expressions. And most of the people that I see in drum classes or drum circles have had that kind of experience somewhere in their life where they were told they shouldn't sing or they should give up that instrument in favor of some other creative endeavor. And so when you have these opportunities to just go for it, they're golden because we don't get them very often.
You know, there was a movie a long time ago. It's not that long, but it was a story about a little boy who was brought up like in an orphanage, and every time he heard a piano, he felt this thing. Do you remember
No.
that story? And at some point, he became this concert pianist, and
Okay.
his mother played the piano, and his father was a rock star, and he would hear this music,
Right.
and then they found each other. Did you ever see that?
No, I don't know
It
that
was
one.
beautiful. It was August something or another. It was
Oh, August Rush.
that's it.
A Robin Williams film, maybe.
He wasn't was Robin Williams. Yes,
Yeah.
he was that crazy man in there, right?
Right.
It was a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
Right. He connected with his mother, and had not seen her,
Hmm.
but through the music,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it was beautiful, and they actually found each other because he was playing a concert.
Right.
It was beautiful, and when I got done, it was one of my most favorite movies. When I got done, and I have these sons, and they would bang on everything.
Yeah.
Everywhere they would go, they
Yeah.
would bang, and I get irritated by it. I was one of those, stop banging on the furniture, stop banging every time you. But after that movie, now I take a, I don't, and it's been years, but even now I let it go
Right.
from that movie.
Yeah. My niece, her name is Giovanna, and she's 3.5 now. Hi. And she is amazing because she is absolutely convinced that she can do anything. And she's an artist. She's a musician. She's a dancer. She's a designer. She's a painter. She can do anything in the world. And it's up until about the age of, I want to say it's 11, that we developmentally hold that same mindset. We're capable of anything. And then we start to compromise.
Oh,
Yeah. Up until then, you are absolutely certain that you don't like green peas. But then you start to compromise. And you're starting to play this game of give and take with the world around you. And we give up on the things that often bring us joy because they aren't practical.
so do you think that drumming is one of those things that brings us back to who we are and our uh, childhood, or our intent as a child, or our childlikeness?
I do. I do. I think drumming, community drumming in particular, is kind of a gateway drug for those things, right? You start to access that stuff that you've set aside for so long. And it gives you that opportunity to let that stuff bubble up a little bit. And my wife is a coach, and she is an artist by trade and training, and she brings a lot of creative process into her coaching practice. And she talks about the muse. And if you don't give your muse the love that they demand, they leave, right? So you have to exercise that creative muscle. And so drumming gives you the opportunity to start stretching
Stretching.
that creative muscle.
Why is it a
Yeah.
stretch?
Why is it a stretch? Because we let that atrophy. We let that open-mindedness, we
Right.
let that skill set disappear
Hmm.
as we focus on other things.
So, as an art form,
Mhm.
it's more accepted. You tell me right or wrong. But there's no right or wrong.
Okay.
But it's more accepted to pick up a stick, or to use your hands and not really know what you're doing. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Then maybe it is to pick up, for comfort zone, for people to pick up a paintbrush, or to join a group and sing, or join a group and dance.
Well, that's all subjective, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I paint on my iPad. It doesn't mean that I'm any good. But if it brings me joy and it reduces my stress,
So what's
And it-
easier for people to get into? For people
everybody's
to
got a
open
different medium.
Mhm.
Yeah. Maybe yours is finger painting, and maybe mine is rhythm. And maybe Amnon's a dancer when no one's watching. But who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
But when you go into these settings and do workshops and
Mhm.
things, do you find? I mean, maybe I'm making a stereotype, but I'm just guessing that in brand new situations and team building and things like that, it's easier for people to let loose in drumming than it would for first go round than it would for somebody to say, here, everybody get up and dance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's what I mean.
It's a little more confined, I think, in some regard.
Okay.
It doesn't require you to have a large level of physical coordination or a certain body type. You know, anybody can drum. My buddies down in Charlotte run a benefit called Drum Strong that they created simply because they wanted to raise funds and awareness around cancer initiatives. But they knew that not everyone could ride a marathon or ride a bicycle like Lance Armstrong. You know, so but they knew that everybody could sit there and tap on something, and that was a way for them to access this thing and to participate in the group activity.
Yeah, that's what I'm imagining that to be so.
Mm-hmm.
That drumming, when you're given an opportunity, even as, in a family, I can imagine how cool it would be for a family to get together and drum together.
It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, to make up,
Yeah.
to find that connection, you know?
Right.
It's right.
It's fun
It's
because
fun.
you're participating. It's like, you know, cooking a meal with your family. If you let everyone contribute, then it's really fun.
Right.
If mom has to do it all on her own, it's a lot of work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I want to ask you something else, because how you sense things is pretty interesting. Would you consider yourself to be an empath?
I've never thought of myself that way. My sweetheart would say absolutely not. That I'm not a particularly intuitive person. But I think this kind of thing, I have some ability to tune into.
So when I talk about an empath, for all of you listening, I'm talking about somebody who can feel what other people are feeling. Tap into people's feelings.
I would say I'm sensitive. I would say I am compassionate. I don't know that I would have described myself as an empath. Yeah.
And
but it's language, it's vocabulary, so you can talk about me that way if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm curious because, like, I feel I'm an empath. I feel like I can experience other people's feelings. I have to know when to shut it off. You know, if you're putting yourself into situations where you are going for the feeling, because that's what you're doing when you are. And tell me if when you are working with people, when you're working with a group, you're working with kids, you are going for the connection.
Yes, but I'm doing that as an observer, as a facilitator. I am a part of, yet separate from the process. So I am helping people move from that along that spectrum of learning, exploring, empowering, collaborating, and taking charge. So I have to have some distance from that process in order to be effective as a facilitator.
Right, but then granted, because even when I'm coaching, I can feel some of where somebody is, but I don't want to feel everything they're feeling, right? Because I mean, what good will I be if I'm like feeling like in some cases that my world is falling apart?
Yeah.
So I have to be able to know on some level what their experience is like in order to support somebody in going forward.
Sure.
Or understanding where they are.
You'll see in a group setting different levels of ability or comfort. And so part of my job is to go in and make that more accessible for people. But I would say my ability to tune in and empathize, if you will, is related to musicality and group dynamics more than it is to any particular individual.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So okay. Remember, you can all call in. Just want to remind you, 919-518-9773 or computers 2K voice if you'd like to join us on the studio. We'd love to have you if you have a question for Greg, anything about your personal experience, anything you've had before that you want to share about your experience in the arts, in drumming, in anything. And Amnon, did you have a question? You look like you had one. Did you have a question? Okay, so what else would you like to share about this experience of coming together as in this oneness? Like, what's possible for groups I mean, and I guess the one of the questions I want to ask is not just what's possible. What have you seen? Like, what are some really cool experiences? Whether it was with kids,
Right.
like
Well,
like
there've been some good surprises along the way.
yeah, like what kind of surprises? I love those.
What's really interesting is that this is useful because it dispels the ideas of fragmentation, that we're somehow separate from one another. And it gives you an opportunity to figure out how we're all actually connected. For instance, I have one client that brought me in to work with a group in a particular office that was having an issue around race. And so they said, "Hey, Greg, we want you to come up. We want you to work with this group. And they've got a race issue, and you've got 2 hours to fix it." And I thought, what are you talking about? This is crazy. And so I go and spend the first half hour of my program doing get to know you things. And what I discovered was that this particular group had been working together for years, that they worked 12-hour days, that they absolutely loved their clients, but they didn't know one another. And so they had a really lousy break room. They didn't get to use it very often.
How long did it take you to figure out that they didn't know each other?
Half an hour.
Well, then you have some talent.
Maybe. But they're all focused on their...
He has
Aw,
some talent.
The group was all focused on their product and their practice, but they really weren't looking at the relationships between themselves. And so in the course of the next half hour, we learned, for instance, that, oh, Susie really loved her grandkids, but they lived far away. And Bob liked to sing in the church choir. Or that Sally had a son that was dealing with addiction issues. You know, all kinds of stuff that's coming up on a human level that these people never get to talk about. But it was amazing to learn that their issue had nothing to do with race at all. That's just what management perceived to be the problem, because it was a rural town and most of the workforce was African American and the managers were white, and they were being brought in by corporate headquarters and rotated in and out, but they were never training or promoting from within.
It's amazing how we make things up.
It was all about equality and nothing about race.
And so through the drumming, what happened?
This showed up. And so it gave an opportunity to talk about hard stuff that we wouldn't normally get to talk about.
That's fabulous. What was another surprise?
Oh gosh, another surprise.
Anything with kids?
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Kids are so willing to go for it. And kids will do whatever you ask of them. Third grade's my favorite because they'll just do anything. And so you start to learn about what's really lighting their fires. And if we can embrace that and nurture that, then we're creating kids who are doing what they love, and they become stellar at those things. But we have really institutionalized education here in the United States, and so they have to learn what they have to learn. But there aren't these opportunities very often to do these other things.
Right.
So one of the songs that I teach kids is one that I learned in Belize from the Garifuna people just a couple of years ago. And it's all about the things that you do every day. And so we empower the kids to drum and to dance, and they get to dance the stuff that they love. And you just never know what's going to show up. You see a kid that loves his video games, and then you see a kid that loves to ride her pony. But then you see a kid that loves to help his mom in the kitchen. And you just never know what's going to turn up in these kinds of occasions. And it's just magical.
No, and people are magic.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have stories. I think we all want to connect. We just don't know how.
Yes.
There are some people who really know how to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who don't know how to connect but want to.
Right.
And I think that your idea of drumming is a fabulous way to give people permission and a resource, a way to connect even when they know how and when they don't.
Right.
Because it's hard to connect. It's hard to be a connector, want to connect, and people that you want to connect with don't want to connect.
That's the important stuff, right? We can't do it on our own.
No.
As a species, we have been only successful because we've learned to depend on one another. And now we have this abundance in this particular society that allows us to ignore a lot of that.
And when you first saw that thing happen with the drumming and the kids,
Mm-hmm.
and that lit your fire, Had you ever seen anything up to that point that lit your fire, or that showed you the magic of connection like that had?
It's all been a progression. As a scouter, I was involved in the Order of the Arrow, the Honor Camping Society, and there were rituals and ceremonies based on Native American traditions there,
Mm-hmm.
and reconnecting to those tribal ideas and honoring the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go off to high school and I join the band, and so I learn about the power of collaborating through music to create this thing that's bigger than we are. And then I go off to college and I join the military, and I learn about marching and the snare traditions of drumming
You know,
and how those things motivate people and coordinate people.
but you have followed a path of connection.
Yeah,
I mean, you have the things that you have picked up to learn from the things that you have done have been about supporting connection.
right.
Isn't it so interesting when we look at our lives and we look back and we go, you know, it make the military. I mean, you don't think, maybe I wouldn't think about the same thing, but it's been part of your path,
Sure.
right? To be this supporter of connection.
Hmm.
And so are all the things that you have done. And it's interesting that you, even early on, that it wasn't the people you were connecting with. It was the something else.
It was the bigger picture.
It was the bigger picture.
It's about the bigger picture.
So you started off connecting with the bigger picture.
Right.
And then your path has
Takes
been
you
to
into
get
some smaller pockets.
to get
Yeah.
back to the bigger picture.
Mhm.
Isn't life just funky?
It's interesting.
It is
Well, when you
ju-
think about what's that old saying about, there are lots of ways to climb the mountains, but they all go to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that has been true for me as well. I keep circling back around that mountain, finding these common threads that are all taking to me the same place.
And so is it the feeling for you? Is it like a real peace? It's like this is your purpose. Would you say this is your purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. This is my purpose.
This is your purpose.
Yeah.
And you know that.
Well, I've done a lot of work around trying to figure out what that purpose was
And-
and how to articulate that purpose.
Before you did drumming or after?
Well, I've really done the work more recently, trying to figure out how to relate drumming, this weird thing that no one would think was welcome in a classroom or a corporation or a congregation, and how to language that in a way that has broader appeal.
This is hard. I know a lot of you out there are sitting on things that are profound, and it's hard to put into words
Hmm.
the experiences that we have when they're profound or when they're just ours, and we know they're good, but we don't really sometimes know how to express how good or the magnitude behind what they can do.
Right.
And we take a look at certain things that seem so simple, like say drumming, and not realizing the power. Like we've talked about this before, Greg and I, about this thing that I like to do with talking sticks, and how it brings people together,
Hmm.
and it helps them connect in their humanity.
Right.
And this is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Everybody is the same, and it's hard to put into words those kinds of experiences because when you just explain the experience, it's hard to paint the picture of the possibilities. But when you've experienced the experience, it takes on something different.
Yeah. Yeah. If you just talk to me about it, maybe I understand it in my mind. But when I get to experience that with you, then I've really come to embody
Right.
that level of expression, that level
Right.
of connection, and that's
Right.
huge.
It's huge.
That's so different. We spend so much time in our heads
Right.
that we lose touch with what we actually feel. And back in the old days, they talked about the gut feeling, or I know it in my bones. Those kinds of expressions were much more common 50 years ago, 60 years ago, right?
Well, back 50 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. So part of what I studied in graduate school was the downfall of that connection to our physical being, and how during the industrial era, we invented this thing called the company doctor. And the company doctor is suddenly the person that's able to decide whether or not you're capable of working today, right? And so we start going to these experts that are now the people who decide whether or not we're healthy or happy or whole.
Mhm.
And we lose connection with ourselves and with our
Right.
communities.
Right, exactly. So this has been an interesting journey for you,
Yeah.
and for us to be a part of and watching how as a young man, as a young boy, what he did all the way, all the all the things that take you to your passion. And then one day you wake up and go, oh, let me connect it backwards.
Right. Purpose work is huge, and it's so important. And I think what really started me on that particular path was touching base with a TED talk by a fellow named Simon Sinek, Sinek, called Start With Why. And his talk was really about marketing, but the premise of it is understanding why you do what you do.
Not just the what,
Yeah.
but the why.
Right.
And it's great. So we highly recommend that you do it. So tell everybody where they like. This is time for some bodacious marketing.
Oh, okay.
Go.
So you can find me online at drumforchange.com. That's DRUMFOR change.com. And my new website will actually launch in about a week. So you'll get to see my sleek new minimalist styling that I'm really excited about. But you'll also see my calendar that will tell you about all the occasions where you might find me. Coming up, I'm working regionally throughout North Carolina. I'm hosting a conference for people that do what I do down in South Carolina at the end of February. My sweetheart and I are hosting a retreat in April, the first weekend of April. It's a digital detox retreat. We're calling it Camp Unplugged. We hope you can join us there. It's an opportunity to stay in a cabin, sleep in a bunk bed, eat in a dining hall, and turn in your technology so that you can have face-to-face conversations with the people around you.
I think what you'll find, and just what I'm imagining, is when you drum, you connect, but then you also have those times of meditation at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're accomplishing all kinds of goals. So, and if you are in Timbuktu and you want to know more about Greg, he'll come to you in
For
Timbuktu.
sure. Yeah, I'm happy to travel because I think it's important and worthy work. And it doesn't need to be serious work. We can do this stuff joyfully and still accomplish the goals.
Exactly. So whether you're working with children, adults, corporations, whatever it is, it's there's opportunities. I mean, Greg, do you believe that people can connect?
Do I believe that people
Yeah.
can connect? Are you kidding?
There you go. There's your
Yeah.
answer. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, people can connect.
Without doubt.
Without a
We
shadow
need
of a
it.
doubt.
We need
Yeah,
it.
it doesn't take much. It takes a little drumming. It takes some things like that. But it really and truly, we're meant to connect. So, you might want to take them up on it. So, can you show my slide just a second? So if you're listening, not if you, but just listening to this, I'm offering a special coaching package for anyone out there that's listening. Just give me a holler at Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com, and that could be for couples, families, individuals, businesses. Just let me know. And final words of wisdom, Greg?
Final words of wisdom. Express yourself. It's important. Yeah. Don't bottle that stuff up. Go out and connect with other people. Make those heart connections, whether they're verbal or musical or a great big hug, and reconnect with the people and the planet that you live with.
Yeah. And I would like to add just to that, because there's not much I could say to that. But in that connection, we don't have to be perfect, because when we're doing these kinds of things, we're all in the same place and we're having fun and we're sharing in the party, so to speak. So it's important to go and do it. Find yourself a group, start a group. And you
Yeah.
don't need, right? Can people start their own groups?
Sure, absolutely.
And where else do they find groups?
There's lots of resources online. If you're looking for a facilitator, someone that does what I do, go to dcfg.net. That's the website for the Drum Circle Facilitators Guild. And you can find practitioners committed to professionalism in this craft of bringing people together through rhythm.
Cool. So with that, we are going to be ending our show for the day. We love having you here, love connecting with us. This is one way of our connection. And I invite you to come back each and every week for more stories, more, again, techniques, philosophies, ideas, things maybe you thought about, but maybe, just maybe, you're thinking about it a little bit deeper today than you have before. Maybe you have in mind today somebody that you would like to connect with, and here's a good way to start that conversation. So with that, have a marvelous, marvelous day, marvelous week. We'll see you next week, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Come again. Everybody, take care. I'm Nan. See you soon. Bye, everyone.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.